Welcome back. We're at episode 57. This is Pure Webserver Part 5. And in this case, we're going to take all of the stuff we did in the previous videos with making an actual web part type, and then making that a functor, and then making that a semigroup, and all that good stuff. And we're actually going to show the power of doing that, and how once you have these monoids or semigroups, then you can take a whole bunch of small things, squish them up together, and then you get this really powerful thing that you can reason about from that. So all of this is just our boilerplate from before. This is our type that we defined in the previous ones. And we've had to rewrite now some of our things like our writer and our filters. Because we want them to deal with web parts now, which actually simplifies this tremendously. And what I also like is that where we had a method filter and a path filter before, basically, they're very, very similar now. Basically, the implementation is identical for both. It's just whether we're looking at the path from the rec or the method from the rec. So basically, they end up being very, very similar as far as implementation, and in fact, we could easily abstract that out into a singular thing. But oh no, and then so we've got our choose here, and in the choose had to change as well. But basically, it's once again what takes multiple web parts and returns one web part. So between this choose here and the fact that a web part is a monoid, here's what our app can actually now look like. So we have a cars. So cars is a web part. People is a web part. Post is a web part. OK adding car is a web part. Choose takes multiple web parts and creates a web part. So one way that you can think about this is basically everything that we have here is a web part. So this is a web part. And cars is also a web part. So what we talked about was with the semigroups or with monoids, the concept of like with numbers, you can add them together and it doesn't matter which order you add things, but it just all ends up working. And what you can do, and our web part now can work very similar to that. But instead of numbers, we have a web part. And instead of the plus sign, we have this concat. So what we can look at this as saying is, given this web part, let's add another web part to it, because that's our concat. And which web part are we going to add to it? Well, we've got this choose, so it's going to be whichever one is the first one of these web parts in here that match. So what we'll do is, we'll look at seeing whether or not this path matches. If the path is cars, then we're going to choose whether or not it's a post or a get. If it's a post, then we'll add to this web part. We'll add another web part, which just writes out, 200 OK and adding car. But what's neat is this could be a full app, but so could this. It just would not actually write out anything. If you passed it /cars, it would return just 200. But now we can take this web part and this other web part that's a completely different endpoint, and we can just combine those together into an application. So it doesn't matter how complex we get as far as nested hierarchies of these monoids. It all just works. It all just makes sense once you understand the fact that concat is just smashing two of them together to make one. Just like adding 1 and 2 is going to create you a new number that's 3, and that 3 is just the combination of the two other things. So we can continue building these up as complicated as we wanted, or as many of them as we wanted, I should say, rather than complicated. We can add as many of them together as we want. It's the same thing all the way up the stack, and all we need really is just this concat to add the things together. I mean, this choose really helps in our case because we want to make sure that that we can do different things for a post and a get. And then by choosing on cars and people, we're choosing also on the path. But we didn't have to write it all huge within this one application. We can take lots of small little applications combine them all together and to make one larger application. And this still then works. So I hope you've enjoyed it. That's showing some of the reason of why we took all the time in the past couple episodes to write all of these things with our web part, to deal with our concat and to make it a semi-group and all of that good stuff. And it's because now that we've done all of that fun stuff, we've greatly simplified our filters. Our filters here and here are basically the same thing. We could even abstract that out to just calling a function and passing some predicate or something. But we've greatly simplified those. And now that we've done that, creating an application is just adding a bunch of web parts together to create one web part at the end. So I hope you'd enjoyed it. This has been part 5 of our pure web server, and at this point the only thing we have left to do is really to inspect a request, and at that point we'd be pretty well off building an app with this. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you think, and see you soon.